How have you been, Anne?
I've been very good. I've had a very successful 3 weeks back in England doing my data collection in schools, which has all gone very, very well. So I've been, so I've got a lot of transcribing to do. So this topic is really, really helpful and timely for me, because I'm just in the process of deciding what I need to do with all the information and how I can process it.
I see. Are you going to use a software for your work?
Well, that's what I'm interested in, because you said that there are a couple of things that you're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm aware of both of them, but I'm not quite sure what the advantages and disadvantages of using both of them are.
Yeah. Well, we can definitely talk about that. You see, ideally the software is going to help you organize your thoughts, but it won't do the analysis for you, if that makes any sense. You know how, for example, Microsoft Word, you just have, it's a word processing software. So you write in it, but there is no button that will, like, for example, give you a shorter version of what you've written. It doesn't understand what you've written. Similarly, a qualitative analysis software, it doesn't do the analysis. You won't find a button that says analyze data. What we will have is a sort of a codes database. It's a way for you to organize your codes in coding, and then create visualization based off that. So it just makes working easier, but it doesn't do the work for you. Now, what you need to know is basically you have many options. There are more than 10 different software quality. What they call it? They are called something like
CACDAS.
Yeah, CACDAS, which is a I don't remember. It's something about qualitative data analysis software package, something like that.
It's computer-assisted qualitative.
Exactly, computer-assisted. Yeah, I was just trying to figure out what the system.
The CAA.
Yeah, computer-assisted. It's a rather outdated term, isn't it? Computer-assisted.
Yeah.
Anyways, so there are loads of them, but most of the times you are going to use one of two, either NVivo or Atlas TI. Right?
Yeah.
Now, both of them are really good, and they are both used widely in qualitative data analysis. There are slight differences. Most of the times, how I saw it, how I read online, and how some of our colleagues found it, is that Atlas TI is a more powerful tool, and it is more reliable. So it's not going to freeze, it's not going to crash as much as NVivo does. See? Second thing, if you are going to use what is called like non-traditional English codes, like if you're going to use, for my case, for example, Arabic or Hebrew or any language that tries from right to left instead of left to right, or an Asian language or whatever, NVivo won't help you. You will have to go with Atlas TI. So the gist of it is that Atlas TI is a better option, except there's a catch. With Atlas TI, you have to pay for the software. With NVivo, you get it free from the university.
Do you know how much it costs?
Yes, I know exactly how much it costs. I remember writing that down on the blog. Something in around like £60 for a 3-year license. So it's not unreasonable. Actually, it is very reasonable.
Yes.
That's why first I was taking with NVivo, because the university gives free NVivo for all students. But then I realized no, it's not that much. So I opted to the Atlas TI option. Hafiz did the same thing, and Hissa did the same thing, and most of the students that I talked to, they did the same thing. They all opted for Atlas TI, and I really recommend it. As you will see now, how it is very helpful. I will share my screen with you, and I will show you how helpful it is in doing your code.
Okay.
Right.
What have the other two been using? Have either of the other two been using software to analyse their interviews?
Yes, I've used both NVivo and then I transitioned to using Atlas TI. So what I did is I first of all started to use NVivo, and I found that because I was so focused on knowing how to use it and learning how to use it, it really conflicted with actually getting to grips with the craft of qualitative data analysis, getting to grips with the craft of coding, which is quite iterative, and you need many attempts actually to get to grips with the actual techniques of coding and looking at your data. And I found that using NVivo, I was distanced from engaging my data, and I was engaging more with NVivo. Then I think I sort of plateaued in terms of I sort of kept up with trying to learn how to use NVivo, and I decided to code my data in Word initially, my pilot data in Word, and that helped me to actually remain close in a close relationship with the data, to understand it, to understand coding, the different types of coding, etc., etc. So you did that thematic analysis, grounded analysis. And so I found that was much more formative, because at the end of the day, the most important thing is not that you know how to use the software, but actually, do you know how to analyze? Do you understand that process and why you're making certain decisions? So after that, I then had a choice of either returning to NVivo, because I thought, for this main data now, I don't want to have to keep on doing it in Word, because actually, the more data you get, the more useful a software package becomes, because you want to be able to organize and manage your data that's increasing in volume. And so then you mentioned Hafiz. I saw him analyzing his data. So he was at the end of his analysis, and he had visually arranged all of his codes with quotes beside them from the text. And I saw that, and I thought, for me personally, as a person that I quite like to use diagrams, and I'm quite visual in terms of how I think and link concepts together. I found that Hafiz's way of organising his analysis through Atlas TI, I found that was much more kind of my style of thinking. And I think you can do the same with NVivo in terms of creating more kind of visual ways of analysing data and linking codes and concepts together. But I think with NVivo, it's just for me, it was the user interface. It was just too kind of it wasn't as intuitive as Atlas TI. I kind of feel like Atlas TI is slightly more intuitive, because you have, I use the Windows version, and it's slightly different from the Mac version, but I just found that I was clicking on a lot less, and I was much more sort of in tune with the data. But I know that to be honest, there isn't that much difference between Atlas TI and NVivo. It is just the user interface at the end of the day. And I think, Warwick, you can get a free subscription to NVivo. I paid £68 for Atlas TI, and I've got it for 2 years. So I paid for the Windows version of it. And yeah, I think it's important to, first of all, before you sort of commit to doing all your analysis through any software package, is to just do it by Word. Like, just print it out even, and just use coloured highlighters or something, and really get to grips with the way that the analysis works. Because it's an iterative process in actually learning how to analyse. So I think it's important to keep a reflexive diary at the same time as you analyse, because you can say, I went down this path with the analysis, and then I realised that actually it might not have been working because of X, Y, and Z. And then you're keeping a record of your analytical process as well. So don't be afraid just to not use the software for the time being, and to just have a go at analysing, printing it out, use as many different strategies as possible, and then decide which one is the way forwards. And with Atlas TI, you can have a trial. So you don't have to commit to buying anything until you've used it as a trial as well.
I just want to settle down the issue with the license comparison. With Atlas TI, you have 2 years, as you said, with a 30-year trial. and it cost about $99, so 60-something pounds. Yeah.
Okay.
In Vivo it costs more, but we students have it for free. Yeah. That's just.
Could I just ask whether or not in academic circles, whether either of them are more widely recognised? Because I know NVivo's been around for much longer. Is there any academic stringency that you lose with going to something that's maybe newer?
I'm not sure, actually.
I think if you read articles that have been published recently,
They used to use NVivo a lot,
Yeah.
but it's changing for the benefit of Atlas TI.
Yeah.
We have more.
I think there's more of a parity. But I don't think there's much of a kind of elitism around it, or I don't think your work can be judged upon which software you use. It's more about the judgment comes from the decisions you've made and why you've made them. So there isn't actually. So usually when I read an article that mentions software, usually they don't even mention NVivo or Atlas TI. They just say CACDAS was used.
I wouldn't really worry about it. As long as you're comfortable with the software you're using, don't worry about being, as you've mentioned, ostracized.
But you both like Atlas TI better than NVivo.
I personally prefer it.
User friendly.
The thing Arviel mentioned about the user interface. Atlas TI looks a lot more like Microsoft Office, so it is friendlier, or it is what we are more accustomed to, because we all use Office. So it is built, and you will see it now in a minute. I will show you how it really looks like Microsoft. NVivo is a little bit different and not very intuitive in that manner. Now,
anything to?
No,
Do you use NVivo?
I never use Atlas. We use a tiny bit NVivo.
Yeah.
Don't really like it because I spend lots of time learning, reading how to use it.
so the idea is you do your interviews and then you transcribe them. You don't have to. You can use, by the way, both NVivo or Atlas to transcribe. I personally didn't do that. I transcribe them in Office, in Word, or whatever, and you just have the text, and you add the text to as a new document. Each interview is a new document in Atlas TI, right? Then
that's what I've been doing. I've just been typing it up in Word because I just think it's much easier, and I can copy and paste it if I need to into another program.
Yes, and then you will start doing the coding. Now the coding is a tricky thing because. With coding, you want to code as much as you can, so every nuance that can refer to something, a concept, you want to make that a code because you don't know what codes you are going to actually use later in the analysis, but also you don't want to overwhelm yourself with code. So it's very tricky to know what to code and what not to code. Basic idea is if you feel it is related to your research question, go with it. If you're not sure, then don't. But it's not as easy as it seems. Because things can, what's the word? Cascade? So they snowball. They snowball.
You end up chasing after things that aren't really linked to maybe what your main focus of your project is.
Exactly.
They're interesting, but maybe not strategic.
Exactly. Right. Now, let's move to Atlas very quickly, if you are not familiar with it. Now, you've used it. Have you used it as well?
I've never.
Atlas. Okay, very quickly, I will just show you how it looks like and why.
Have you finished your interviewing now, Mohammed?
Yes.
Has it gone well?
Very well, actually. It was really nice. I'm not sure if you can see this.
Yep.
Right. So basically, here on the left, and please join in if I made a mistake because I'm new to the software. So here in the left, and this is by the way not my database. This is a sample database. Here on the left you have documents. Each one of these documents is basically a transcript. You see?
Yeah.
I think, yeah. And this software supports all languages. So this one is in Arabic, for example. Right. When you have your transcription, your transcript here, and you want to add a new code, you just highlight the part that you want to code, and either right-click, add coding, or code, new code. Right? Now there is something very helpful called code in vivo, not to be conflicted with in vivo the software. This is code in vivo. This means the name of the code or the code name will be this section. So to make it clearer, here is a new code, and I say add coding, and then it will ask me what is the code name. So I will say, for example, use of language importance or whatever, and that will become a new code. Now, here I found something he mentioned, which is finance is very important. For example, I want this to be a new code, and I want the sentence itself to be the name of the code. So now I will have a new code, which is basically called finance is very important. And here I can see the codes, and you can see finance is whatever. Where is it? There is important, no.
It'll begin with F if it's...
Yeah, it should.
So you would code
it basically
phrases.
should be here.
You would code phrases rather than keywords.
Yes, there's one. Oh, it is.
Yeah, that is. Finance
Yeah.
is very important.
Yeah, you can actually code whatever. You can code either words or sentences. Now, there is a helpful part, another concept, which is quotation. If you have like a longer quotation and you want to keep it, you can just add it as a quotation, create quotation. Now, so we have codes, and these are created by one of two methods, and then we have quotations. Now, here on the left, remember, first we will have documents, then we have codes, I think. Yeah, codes and quotations. This one is quotations, and this one is codes. Right?
Yeah.
Now, memos is just something that you add as a memo. It has nothing to do with your data.
Yeah, it's just simpler. It's a bit long.
Yeah, you can spend a lot of time on it and still...
Now,
Yeah, no, I didn't know I got it.
so the codes is a way of you breaking down the data into like groups or homogeneous groups. So two people talk about the same thing, they have the same code or whatever. Now we come to where Atlas TI really shines. In order for you to organize your data, you will use two different kinds of organizational tools. You have the codes, and you have the code groups, and you have something called code prefix or prefix. That the title that you give to a code, you can play with that title. You can, for example, add a prefix to the. You see here that we have the codes here on the left. If I name them in a smart way, I can have because they are sorted alphabetically here. I can have codes that are related to each other, closer to each other. So the title that I give the code will help me in getting similar codes quickly. That is code prefix. Additionally, I can use what is called code groups, and with code groups, it's basically used not for analysis but used for housekeeping. Now, let me step back for a second. You have your data and you have your transcription, and Atlas is helping you see it and understand it. What you need to see is two things. Number one, housekeeping, so making sure your data is organized. And number two is analysis. What I mean by that, I did two interviews with two professors, two department heads, and they both talked about the importance of leadership and financial incentives in their departments, right? Now, housekeeping part of me will tell me I want every code related to the first interview to be easily identified from the codes from the second interview. So I will call the codes from the first interview, for example, code 1 leadership, code 1 financial incentives. And the codes from the second interview will be called code 2 leadership, code 2 financial incentive. So housekeeping is just keeping my data easier to differentiate across different interviews, for example. Or maybe you have themes, or maybe you have, if you have a case study and you interviewed a couple of people in the first case study and a couple of people in the second case study, you want to realize, you want an easy, quick way to access those interviews in the first case study and differentiate them from the second case study. Now that doesn't have anything to do with the actual analysis, because when you go to this is all housekeeping. When you go to the actual analysis, now you are interested in the codes that talk about leadership and codes that talk about financial incentive or whatever example you want to use, right? So in order to differentiate between the housekeeping and the analysis, you will use code families and code prefixes and then codes or networks. So the idea that I want you to have is, and I've written that down, and I can write it in the blog if you want, but I find this very helpful. Let me bring it bigger so you can read it easier. You see, these they are called building blocks: code prefixes, code groups, networks, and there's something called supercodes. I don't know how to use it yet. So they can be used for organizing and housekeeping and for analytical purposes. So usually you would use code prefixes and code groups for housekeeping, and you would use networks for analysis. So I'll give you an example. Let's look at the codes here, and you can see that prefixes, for example, for these ones, factors affecting something, factors influencing factors. These are all about the factors. See? So the person who did this database used the prefixes to make it easier to access them. Or here, they used a certain code to make it easier to differentiate or to list these close to each other. Now, all the codes that I can see here can be accessed up from this button, and I can see all my codes. Now I can group the codes that are similar to each other. For example, I can highlight these and then drag and drop to the left, and I have created a new group and I can give it a name. So for example, all codes within the first case study, all of them, right? So this is all about housekeeping. This is all about me getting the codes that mean something to me together. But that has nothing to do with analysis. Well, I might be using that for analysis, but when I want to do the analysis, the actual analysis, I will use the other part. Then you go back to the documents. And I'm sorry if you are getting lost. It's just about getting used to the terms. So code prefix is the naming, and code group is what we've just covered, and these are used for housekeeping. Now the network is more visual representation of what we are doing. Here from the left, I can go to networks, and for example, I have this network. I can drag and drop the codes that I want to add to this network, and I can make links between them. So I can say, for example, this relates to this, is part of, is caused by, supports this, and I will have something like this. This visual representation can get very complex, but in the same way, it will make it easier for me to see all my data. So here we have these codes. These are parts of this super code, right?
Sometimes I find that you can't import spreadsheets.
Now this is going to help me analyze. This is going to help me with analysis. Because now I can see all the related things together. Right?
Yeah.
You can do that.
Right.
Really easy.
Now, if this all seems overwhelming, let me assure you that about 2 weeks ago, I had no idea about Atlas TI and didn't know how to use it at all. You can find all these information either online, you can read it if you want, or do as I do and go to YouTube. And on the blog, on our blog, our last entry, which talks about that, you will see under our first one, Atlas TI. Here you have tutorials. You have tutorials on atlasti.com. You can read as long as you want, or as I do, go to YouTube. And you will see people doing exactly what I just did, and you can do as I did, pause and go back and forth until you get the hang of it. So, yeah, it's really straightforward. And the idea that they always say, and you have to keep in mind, is that NVivo is a way, Atlas TI or whatever, it's just a way for you to represent your data in an easier way for you to handle. So you are breaking it down in smaller chunks so you can make sense of it, but it doesn't do the analysis for you. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, that's...
Am I right in thinking that Atlas TI you can have other kinds of data in as well, apart from just transcripts from interviews?
You can have audio recordings, photos, videos, and
okay.
I think
right, so you can, right, so I can actually keep my audio recordings in there as well.
Yes, you can.
One thing to say about Atlas TI is that you need to, when you import an audio recording or a document, Atlas TI just creates a link to where it is in a file. So it won't make a copy and have it in the Atlas TI software or framework. It just links it from what's already. So you'll have to save your audio to the hard drive of whatever computer or laptop you're using, just so you don't get caught out if you decide to use it.
Okay. Do you know whether you can keep Excel spreadsheets with sort of data from questionnaires and Likert scales, that kind of thing? Can you use that with Atlas TI?
I've had a bit of difficulty using Excel spreadsheets, but I think that's just because I'm not an expert on Atlas TI. But I haven't found a way to incorporate Excel into Atlas TI in a way that I can still edit it. Like maybe not edit it in terms of using Excel functions, but just be able to edit what's there within Atlas TI. And I think if you're using questionnaires, it might be better to use a statistical software package like SPSS or something like that, because they are designed to handle that sort of data.
Yeah.
If it's qualitative questionnaires, then I think it's probably best just to look at different software and see what other people have done with it, and to see how they've analysed it. So YouTube is quite good because you can see tutorials for every function really on YouTube. Is there anything else? Have you used any questionnaires?
No.
Could I ask another kind of related question, which isn't specific to software? When you've been transcribing, have you tried to type exactly what is said, or have you tried to make it a clean transcription where actually the key things have come out? I'm not sure what other people have done, because that's one issue that I'm struggling with.
The first interview that I transcribed, I spent a really long time on it, and then I asked my supervisor if there's any way to speed it up, and she said that faithful verbatim wasn't when you transcribe every single thing that they say in the way that they said it, because you can omit certain things. So if they restart a sentence you don't have to type everything. You can just type the sentence that they said in the end. You know, as long as you're being faithful to what they're saying. So people have different sort of, they might say a lot, and it's up to you as to whether that's important in your research, maybe to convey whether they're unsure of themselves or something, or whether you just think, actually, I'm not really going to incorporate this in any way into my analysis, or how I'm looking at what they've said. So it's a good idea to maybe discuss it with your supervisor as to sort of how faithful you should do it. But you don't need to write every single thing they say. You just need to use a bit of kind of sort of your own judgment in making that call.
I couldn't have said it better, because as she said, you don't have to write everything unless the thing that is being said, the ums and the ahs and the stuttering, is really important, is of meaning for your research. You know what I mean? For example, people who deal with people who have trauma, post-traumatic victims, for example, you want to know how much they stutter when they answer the question. Unless you really need that information, you are just going to be wasting your time. Now, the thing that I want to add is that sometime in the future, either when you're writing your thesis or in your viva, you have to justify why you did that and why you didn't do that. So why you didn't go with the verbatim transcription, why did you do edited transcription? And what you are going to say is that I want to stay true to the source as much as I can, but I cannot convey it 100% with 100% accuracy. So there is always a data loss, because, for example, even if I wrote everything down, I didn't take a video recording of the interview. So there is always lost information. So as much as what I have captured is answering my question and is good representative of the data that I need, that's going to be okay. So what you have to worry about is how to justify what you are going to do. And I'm sure whatever you do is going to be okay as long as you can justify why you did that. And keep in mind, yes, my pleasure. Yeah. Now there is something I want to mention about coding, actually, because how do you go about getting codes out of your text? You have the interview, but how do you know what to code and what not to code? Because coding is actually I want to say an art, but it is more of a craftsmanship. So when you get better at it, you get I can see that with myself. You get better at catching the code. So it just jumps into your face, like this is a code. So basically, there is a guide that I used at the beginning, and now it's becoming like second nature for me. So you have to look for one of 5 or 6 kinds of words or wordings that you are going to catch and make a code out of. These are, number 1, behaviors or acts. When someone says like, talk about their behavior. I was doing that and I was looking forward to this. We were engaged in something like that. So this will become a code about engagement, you know. And second one is events. When people mention important events, for example, a wedding, graduation ceremony, they talk about deadlines and that they have to meet. These are all important events. Activities, when they talk about what they do at work and what they do before, after, whatever. Number 4, states. Yes, when they talk about their experiences, and for example, someone would say, I was feeling hopeless or frustrated with my supervisor or with my manager, and this is something I had to go through a lot. States, because this is going to then show up with your analysis. I can already see it when you are talking about how this affected people, and you will say 80% of them were feeling frustrated, 20% were feeling engaged or challenged with this kind of behavior or whatever. That is states. And then the next one is relationships or interactions. When they mention things about their colleagues or their subordinates or supervisors, of course, it's going to be different in your research context. Conditions and constraints. Condition and constraints examples is when I lost my job, when before I contacted what they call it, the manager, no, the manager, before I contacted the child services or whatever. So conditions and constraints and consequences again. Finally, settings. Settings, when they talk about, for example, the workplace, the university, a setting could be a code in itself, right? In my case scenario, settings could be campuses, because the universities that I am researching have different campuses. Each university has different campuses. So each campus is a setting on itself. Right. Now,
and is that a formal set of codings that you found in a book? Is that a recognised thing, or is that something that you specifically developed for your project?
No, that is something that I read, but I found very helpful because I stuck to. And what I'm saying is that after a while it becomes second nature, so you just pick up on those things.
Yeah.
You know, because when you start, the only thing that you're doing is, you know, you have your research questions. What you're doing is you're giving one code for every research question. And that is very basic, and that is just scratching the surface. Because your data has so much more. Because if you are going to do that, if you are going to give one code for each question, you could have just done a survey. You didn't need to do interview. You know, what we do with interviews is we want to see what people have to say. And this becomes more and more important when you are going towards the grounded theory, because you don't know what you are going to face. So you have to learn how to pick up on these things. So when you first start, you just are looking for word repetitions. You are looking for people who said the same thing, so you can make a code out of it. But what you need to learn is pick up words that aren't necessarily repeated across different cases, but that you feel are important and make sense of and are of worth. Something like that.
That's really helpful, thank you.
I hope it is, yes. I found it helpful and I just wanted to share that.
Is it okay to mention one thing about memos?
Please.
With Atlas TI and also with NVivo, and also if you just do it in Word, when you come up with a code, you can also write a memo, a theoretical memo, and so for each code you can just write a few lines as to why you've decided this is a code, or any thoughts you have about what the code means for that piece of data, or in a wider sense in relation to other codes. And what happens is as you go throughout your analysis, you build up a bank of memos, and then when you're writing up and you're thinking about how the codes link together, you've got a kind of trail of your thinking and what the codes mean, and it helps you to sort of deepen your analysis when you get to the stage at which you want to be considering things at a deeper level and really trying to figure out relationships between codes as well. And it's important. Sometimes you feel like, at first I thought my memos had to be like written in like a peer-reviewed language way, but actually your memos can be, written in any style you want. They can be really informal. I've seen some articles where people have put in examples of a memo that they wrote, and the language isn't even that academic. It's very basic, and it's just being faithful to your thinking at the time. And I think it's good to practice writing out what you're thinking about your codes, because then it really speeds up as well your analytical process, because you're not having to sort of when you're coming up with the codes, you're kind of bringing your subconscious thoughts to the fore, if that makes sense. It's good to kind of make them explicit as well. Yeah. So NVivo and Atlas TI, they both have the memo function. So you can link memos to specific parts of your data, or you can link them to memos. You can link them to quotes. You can link them to documents. It's got really, the link function is really useful, because then you can just click on a code and you can see your memos and you can see what you're thinking about it. And then also your thoughts can change, so then you can add to your memo as well.
That's what I was going to ask, is when you're actually doing memos, if your thoughts change as you're going through, would you leave the original memos there and add to it, and then actually you can come back and say, actually, my thinking developed through the process of analysis?
Definitely. When you write a memo, if you title it,
date it.
Yeah, you can title it with the code, but then every time you add to it, just put the date next to it. Then you can see you've got the trail then of how your thinking has developed.
Yeah.
And you can also, on the Atlas TI visualization network function, you can also see your memos next to your codes as well. So I really like the way that Atlas TI does that, because I find that sometimes your coding is, even though there's like a sort of procedure to it, sometimes it can be intuitive as well. And but if you capture those thoughts, then you can kind of see them in context as a whole, and then you can kind of make them more systematic, and it's really useful for incorporating that intuitive side of research in a rigorous way. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Right. If there is nothing more about coding, we can move on to the second out of 3 sections. Harvey wanted us to discuss something about doing everything all together, and the craziness of doing a PhD. Please go on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to get a sense of people's experiences in managing the main phase of data collection, and collecting the data, but also making sure you're managing your time well if you're going to be transcribing it and then also analysing at the same time. Or is it better to collect your data, then transcribe it, then analyse it? So just in terms of how to plan that main phase of data collection, really.
Well, my experience is that I've done a whole block of work in schools where I've been collecting lots of data, and my plan was just to transcribe it first and then just focus on actually getting that done as quickly as possible, and then actually at the end of each week write a report or some kind of first impression of the work that I've done that week, so that I don't lose it, and then actually go on to the next week to do the next school. So I've got 3 schools, so for the 3 weeks I'm just trying to do 1 school a week, and I've got questionnaires, and I've got transcripts, and I've got radar charts, all kinds of things, but I'm trying to do 1 school in a week, and then at the end of the week catch as much as I can by writing a short report to actually try and focus my thinking so I don't forget it all before I then go in to do the next one. And then at the end I'll have much more, and then at the end I'm hoping to go and look at some of these computer assisted programs to actually do some more analysis, because I think, as you say, there's an iterative cycle that actually the more you work it, the more you understand it, and the more you come back to it, the more you see, and actually until you've actually written it all out, you won't know quite how they all link together.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, personally, I wanted to do every part as alone. I wanted to collect all the data, but I couldn't. And the main idea here is going to be every PhD is different. Because in my case, it was very hard for me to get access to the people I'm going to interview. So I might be waiting for a week or 2 weeks before the next interview. So I had to fill the time with something. And as you might know, I'm sure you know, is transcribing. It's such a pain in the foot, and it takes so much time.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing data collection and transcribing at the same time, right? Almost in the same time. And I think that was for the best, because when you are transcribing, if you still remember what the people are saying, and if you want to add some metadata or some transcription, for example, I don't think he was or she was being very sincere, or this changed or something like that, or they were busy, all these kind of things. All this data that if you don't write it down, you are going to lose in the future. So transcribing at the same time as collecting data I think is advisable, if you have the time for it. Yeah. From my experience, other people is very different. People who are going for schools, for example, are traveling abroad to collect data. They don't have any time and they don't have the mind for it, because you need to sit down and have like these long hours of just writing down. But analysis, I think, has to be in a separate stage, at least for myself. Because what I wanted to do, I have no experience in doing qualitative data analysis, and I wanted to read about the subject before I dive into it. So I had to finish all the data collection and the transcription. Then I wanted to read about analysis before starting doing that. I like to take my time when I'm doing a new activity or whatever. So I borrowed a couple of books and I put them down and I, basically read them and then started the analysis. This might work for you, this might not, but for me it was really helpful to separate. I think. I'm not sure what happened.
I think it's just when you don't touch the.
Oh yeah, I tried.
Is she still on Skype?
I think it is this screen. It's just turned off on its own.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Anne, are you still with us?
Yeah, I heard a second ago.
Yeah.
I think, is it the cables?
Anne, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still with you.
Yes, we lost you for a second. So can you please repeat what you were saying?
Yes, no, I was just referring back the question to find out what stage of data collection. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name.
Oh, it's Harbia?
Harbia.
Yeah.
What stage of data collection are you at?
So I'm in the second year now, so up until next June I'm collecting data. And initially I thought I would collect the data, transcribe it at the same time. But I found that you kind of want to analyse it sort of as you're transcribing it. And then it's difficult for that analysis not to inform how you're collecting the next lot of data. Yeah. So I was thinking, just trying to sort of get an insight into how other people have managed that, because it changes the nature of the research when you're not going to different. So I'm looking at different schools, and if I'm sort of using one school to inform how I'm approaching the next school, it sort of makes it a bit more complicated in terms of explaining the research process. So I think it's just that time in between going to different places, because obviously you're sort of adhering to their timetable, and so there are periods in between where you've got time and there is opportunity to do transcription.
Yeah. Have you done analysis before in your MA, for example?
Yeah.
So you are familiar, and you are using almost same tools or similar tools? I'm
using different tools. So last time I just did, I just used thematic analysis, and this time I'm using grounded analysis techniques.
I see.
So they are quite different.
They are really quite different. Yeah, they are.
So it's just I don't want to sort of spend too much time on the analysis side of it this year. But then I'm thinking, shall I try and do that to make the most of the time that I have?
Actually, can I say, I think what will happen is not saving the time, but making better sense of what kind of data you need when you start doing the analysis. And that happened with me. I realized I wish I asked this question this way, or I phrased it that way. So it's definitely going to be very helpful if you start analysis earlier, not in terms of saving time, but in terms of making better sense of data and improving your data collection. And then when you're doing the real analysis in the next year, is going to be very straightforward, and you will make more sense of your data because it's a well collected and well gathered data, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think the other thing is, whatever happens, you learn from your experiences. So, as Mohammed was saying, the second time you do an interview, you do it differently because you've learned something the first time round, and
Absolutely
there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to be a little bit pragmatic and recognise in your write-up that actually as time goes on and you become more familiar with things, you get better at it. So you get richer data, and there's not a lot you can do about that. It just, the interviews and the stuff you'll be doing next year will be very different from what you're doing this year because you've just learned so much about the whole process.
Yeah.
So actually, I think trying to stay neutral is really good, but at the end of the day, it's very difficult to actually be completely objective, because we're involved with real people and different interviews sort of take different courses. You will be responding in different ways, and you just can't guard against that, I don't think. Or I found that very difficult to do. It's just recognising that and being pragmatic and recognising that you're doing the best fit that you can, and that is my kind of methodology. So I'm kind of being gentle with myself when I get frustrated, because actually I'm not being necessarily doing exactly the same with all 3 schools that I'm involved with.
You can't.
Because actually they're all different. They've got different makeups, they've got different ethos, they've got different kinds of ways of reacting to children. And actually, as I go through, I'm responding differently. And
you are evolving as well,
to be completely objective.
Yeah, your life now is different from yourself a couple of weeks or months earlier. So the researcher is changing as well. You are changing. You are evolving, ideally.
Yeah.
So don't expect them to be exactly the same. And it's not expected from your PhD to be this. It's the PhD. It's not a Nobel Prize, as they say. There is a nice book I read about that. It's called "It's a PhD is not a Nobel Prize." It's really helpful, because what the author is professor. He's saying is that students. Well, obviously, this is the biggest project you have ever done. The same with me, same with every other PhD student. But it is just a PhD. 3 years might seem really a long time, but they are not. And it is only yourself. So, for example, when you are reading about other people's projects, you're reading other papers, and you see these mind-blowing results or thought process that went into it, and so on. So, look at the list of authors. Look at the finances, the budgeting that you have, the number of years that went into that, and keep things in perspective. So, it's something I've learned quite recently. Don't burden yourself with more than. And after all, the committee that is going to do the life with you, they know what you are capable of. They know what to expect from a single person over 3 years who have never done anything on this magnitude. So don't worry about that. It's going to be okay.
It's funny. I've got a friend who's finished a PhD, and she says when you get to the end of your PhD, you realise that's just the start. Because actually now you know what you don't know, and you want to learn so much more.
Yeah.
It's like an ever-evolving thing. So I felt kind of encouraged. It's like a life journey, isn't it? Well, this is just part of it.
Yeah. What a nice thought. Right. Anything else you want to add to that?
Oh no, thank you very much.
No,
thank you.
I wonder
Kim.
if there's any chance we could sort of improve the process of transcription.
Yeah.
It's not boring.
No,
I spend days and days and just...
Transcription is one of the most laborious things I've ever done. It's really time-consuming and repetitive, mundane, very mundane.
But it's usually quite easy to put to you off and just, I just don't want to listen.
Yeah, you can get fatigued.
Yes.
Can't you? So it's good to break it up with other things. So maybe do some reading. Do stuff that's away from the screen.
Okay.
Go to a seminar. Do things that kind of break up your day, so you're not just sitting down at the screen listening and transcribing. Because I did so much transcribing that I had to leave it for 2 months because I just couldn't do it. I was doing my upgrade anyway, but I couldn't. When you transcribe and that's all I did. Was just the transcription side of it, and I just got so fed up with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Same
I
here.
understand.
I got kind of fed up, but
I tell you my experience. I had about 1 month for transcribing, and let's say I had I don't remember 18 interviews, and within that month I finished about 4 instead of 18. And then another month passed on, and I finished about another 4 or 5. So I knew it is futile. So what I did is a bunch of the interviews I outsourced, and I advise you if you find yourself, because I know I am very slow at typing. If you find that you are losing so much time, and you know you can do better things in that time, but of course it's different. Some people are really quite fast, and also when you're transcribing, you are memorizing and you are doing pre-coding.
Yeah, and
so it's not. Yes. So I did lose something there, although I won some time. So what I did is I outsourced and I paid for a professional company, and they transcribed some of it. But I still had to do, and then when you get the transcription back, you have to read it, and believe me, you have to make corrections. They get it about 80%. They say 90% right, but they get about 75 to 80% right. So every 3-4 words you have to change something, but it's so much easier when you're just skimming and making minor changes than writing everything up, especially if you are a slow writer than like I am. So this is something that I advise other people do. If you want, you can.
How much you paid for this?
Well, that's the catch. That's the catch. They do it per minute.
Yeah.
And there are so many things that go into the number of people. If you have 1 person, 2 or more, that's one. And then the quality of the recording, if it's clear, crystal clear. Now, I use a professionally grade audio recorder, but this is not the best recording. They start with studio recording, so if you are the BBC, for example, and that will save you a lot. And then they have the professional level, and then they have the normal level if you are using your mobile phone, and if you are in the outdoors, if it's really noisy, it all changes. Yes, and the third number of people, noise level, and then the level of detail that you want. Do you want it verbatim, word for word, or do you accept it to be edited? So with minoreness and with everything else, with everything goes into it, it will cost you about £1.50 per minute. So my interviews were about 40 minutes. I paid about, I don't know, £60 per interview.
Per interview?
Yes. But I saved about a week for everyone. Yes, so, but I am really useless at transcribing. That's why.
Yeah, I've spent it like 7 hours across 2 days and doing
for 1 hour.
30 minutes interview.
For a 30 minutes, 7 hours, 12 minutes.
Well,
it's similar to myself. So maybe you're better.
Yeah.
I don't know. You have to call it.
Yeah.
It's a judgment call. Definitely is a judgment call. But again, you have to, reread everything.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Of course. You can't trust because, and then when you're transcribing, the first bunch of interviews, because I used both, because I transcribed some and I outsourced some, I could easily see the difference in conception, how I mastered the first couple of interviews and how coding those were very easy for me, how the rest was harder. So you're losing something there. It's very tricky because it's costing you time, but you're losing something. But it's saving you time, so it costs you money and saves you time. So it's a judgment call.
Yeah, my supervisors sort of recommending to just spend the whole term until December just doing the other.
Yes.
Just say the intro.
Yes. If you decide to go with transcribing, I will also advise you to use a proper transcribing service, a professional transcribing service. I tried the cost saver and I tried the better ones. You will save a lot if you go with the first one. It is international in some country, but it wasn't very good in terms of quality. The other one was based, I think, in Leeds or Leicester. They are here in the UK. It doesn't matter as long as they are like a proper company and based in the UK. They cost a lot. But the whole thing is different. The whole system is different. For example, you send them your documents and you receive the transcription the next day and you get your invoice at the end of the next month. So it is like proper business, like they treat you like they treat their business, their system companies. It's different than the international one that I tried once, and they asked me to send them the money first, and I got a cold feet, and then I decided was just do one interview, and they delivered, but it wasn't as good, and the service is not as professional as the first one. So the first one, they have customers such as the BBC and other, radio shows and so on, because they do transcriptions. So this is my experience so far with transcription. Of course, I've used it before. That's why it was easy when I was like in earlier projects, because I did work in business, and I am familiar with how they work.
Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah.
Are you doing transcription in English or in your own language?
I'm doing comparative studies. I've done my Chinese version.
And that was in Chinese.
Yeah, that's my mother language, so I just do it. But when it comes to English classroom, secondary classroom, it's really I can't get everyone.
Well, I want to know what you think about doing a study with two languages, because you have your data in Chinese and in English at the same time. Yeah. And of course, eventually your thesis is going to have one language, right? You're going to submit in English. Yeah. So how is your experience with that so far, and what do you plan to do in the future? Because, translation is not going to be literal, is it? There's always like a term of, always lose some meaning. So what do you think about that?
You mean about the experience of different?
Yeah, using the two languages. Yeah.
I don't. How to say? I find like probably I find there's a differences because my research or my literal view and my research question are based on in the British or such of English language based research.
And you translate that?
And I translate into Chinese.
Okay.
And then when I ask the teacher, it's not the right question. I'm not knocking on the right door.
I see. It sounds strange because it's translated.
Is it?
That's exactly.
Yeah.
It is
what I was thinking about.
It's completely disaster for first few 3 times or 4 times. When I feel like I'm asking the question and they give me answer they don't know. Yeah.
So they're not thinking in the same framework that you use to make your questions.
And think about it. Even if you deliver the question, their answer is then going to be translated into English, and you will lose some of that meaning.
Yes.
Were you in my seminar 2 days ago? You were.
Yeah.
Remember when I talked about how Vygotsky said every word is a microcosm? It represents our consciousness. He was basically saying the words that we use build small words that represents our worldview and our word construct. So using words and language is very tricky. And when you're dealing with more than one language, it's going to be really tricky.
It's also the fact you're using English literature, which is based in a Eurocentric, Western-centric philosophy, and Chinese education is based not on its own Chinese education philosophical.
It couldn't be further.
So if you're developing questions using one framework, but people are thinking in a different way, those questions, like you said, don't have any relevance for them.
Yeah, it doesn't fit with their thinking.
Yeah, so are you looking at any Chinese education literature at all to see maybe how that informs how the people think or something?
No. I do look into some Chinese teachers' questions, but there's not much written in I guess I didn't get access to that literature. For some reason, they're not online.
Because this is something I've been talking about with other researchers about the fact that a lot of the literature is very Eurocentric, very kind of, Anglo-Saxon, and even if you're researching in the sort of northwest hemisphere anyway, it's you don't know what other kind of approaches there are that other kind of cultures have taken. Yeah. And then there's also the international scholar who is trying to research in their own country but is being informed by epistemology that's been created in another paradigm, and it's kind of I think it's really interesting in terms of kind of that collision of like worlds and the kind of like the lost kind of voices, I think, in academia, because these researchers they were kind of lamenting the fact that academia reproduces a one worldview because it's so rooted within the Northwestern Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm so worried about my data.
No, the fact that we're doing a comparative study with two different.
So I have to make the research question to be the same, or the interview question to be the same thing. But then.
Well, do you want it to be the same, or do you want people to perceive it as the same?
Yeah, I do want people to perceive
exactly.
the same.
So you might change the phrasing, and you can very rightly stand up and justify why you did that, because the aim is not to have the same question or transliteration, it's about translation. And whenever we're translation, there is a amount of freedom. So you can tell the judges or the people that are going to this commission, that are going to be on your viva, it is not about using the same words, it's about conveying the same meaning. That's what matters. How people perceive it, not how people read it. Things like in that line. Yeah. Don't worry about it. It's very challenging when you're doing comparative study, but comparative educational studies, have the potential of breaking barriers, and that is a huge feat.
Yeah.
So, when done right, your research will be very, very much worth like hundreds of other researches if you did it right. It is harder, but it has such a great potential. That's what I mean. A friend of our Hessa, she's doing a similar thing. She's doing research in Saudi Arabia, and not everyone there talks Arabic. And she's going through the trouble of translating the questions into Arabic and then translating their answers into English. And it's a great thing. I wouldn't be able to do it. It's really hard. I don't know how she is doing it. It's not a walk in the park, as they say. It's not very easy. But when she manages to do that properly, and I'm sure she will, what she will come up with is going to be very informative, and such a great research. That's what makes research stand out.
I guess I was quite late. I was struggling with my research question in Chinese because I was talking to my supervisor, saying like, why the teachers are not reacting, or they don't understand my research question. I thought it was they don't have the perception of the teacher questioning, or they don't reflect out that the question is techniques or things.
Yeah.
But when I come to interview the teachers in the UK, the schools, the secondary schools, I realized, okay, so of course I asked the English question, and they understand all what I asked, and I realized maybe this is because of my translation. I'll just translate them straight into my language without changing the rephrase or something.
I think because you are fluent in Chinese. Now I know someone who did their research in a country where they didn't speak the language. Now that is really challenging because now you have the researcher. There is a barrier between the researcher and the subject. But for you, it's going to be easier. What you can easily do, you can easily rephrase it because you have the concept in your brain, and you can rephrase it in a totally different way. As long as you can convey the same meaning, and because it's the same researcher, it's very easy. And I think that's what Hessa is doing, because she knows exactly what she wants to know, what the question is about, and she can rephrase it in any way she wants. Okay. Don't worry about that. Yeah. But make sure you write that down in the methodology.
In the thesis.
If you make things like that, write it down and be ready to justify it if they wanted more justification, and that's it. That's how you pass.
Okay.
Yeah.
That should definitely go in your thesis.
Yeah, I feel like I should.
You could write a paper on that, actually.
Yes, you can. Yeah.
because it will help other Chinese scholars who come
Yeah,
to
be
the
aware of
UK
this,
or
yeah.
America and then going to do their research there. And scholars who are in China but using English. Yeah, so it would be really, really good.
Yeah.
Great.
Right. Anything else? Yes, there is something. I wanted to, these meetings are supposed to be, or not supposed, but we thought that they would be helpful if they're like on a like every fortnight. Fortnight, but the thing is, we don't want them too few, so people feel alienated, because what they are about is bringing people together, and we don't want them to be too much so they get in the way of people doing their research. So I was thinking maybe it is time to reflect and maybe adjust the formula, because it has been a month since we last met, and actually if it wasn't for Habir, she initiated saying, when are we going to meet next? And I was so lost with my research that I really forgot about these meetings. So if we can, you can tell me what you think, whether this current formula is okay or not, make it 2 weeks or not, keep it this way. And then what we can do, I advise we can do is just set up a time from now for the rest of the semester, saying, okay, next every other Thursday, for example, at this exact time, we are going to have a meeting, and I can worry about booking the room and everything, and informing people about the time and the date. And if they can make it, they just show up. If they can't, they either join us or Skype or listen to the audio recording. So if we can go very quickly around the room and see what you have to say about that. Can I start with you, Anne?
For me, this is invaluable, because I feel quite stuck up a long way from people, and I value enormously being able just to meet up. And this is just brilliant for me.
Oh, that's really good to hear.
So I am just so thankful, Mohammed, that you started this, and I'm very thankful to Habib for reminding you, because this is just really timely and it really helps me. So I've got libraries I can use here, but real people are just so precious. So for me, you say what you want to do and I'm there.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, that's really good to hear. Right, Habib, about the recurring 2 weeks, is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's manageable, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, Kim? Yes. Now, about the date, I prefer it not to be on a Friday. And when I first asked people, I remember they said, let's not put it on a Monday. It's very early in the week, Friday, I have other engagements. We have the prayer and everything. So if that's why we met at 2 p.m. because we had something in the morning. So how about either Wednesday, Thursday, like towards the middle and the end of the week? Is that okay? Or do you prefer weekends? Although I'm not sure.
Weeks are better for me.
Weeks. Yeah, weekdays. I like weekdays as well. Weekdays. Do you prefer AM or PM? Like we can do it 10 a.m., 11 a.m. or 2, 3, 4 p.m.
I have to say the afternoon is better for me.
It's better for me.
Okay,
well,
afternoon, yeah. I think something like every other Thursday at 2 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, what I will do is I will write down the dates for this semester, about 2 or 3 months, when the dates are going to be, and then I will book the room. I think it will be in the central campus, because within 2 weeks we will have moved in, hopefully, in social sciences.
I was working alone for
Yes, yeah, it will be somewhere around there. Yeah, and I will keep you updated. Right.
And then, Mohammed, it's the idea that we give you ideas of things that maybe we would like to share. Or
Please,
talk about.
yes. If you this is about solving problems and sharing experiences.
Yeah.
So if you are going through something like Kim did, like Arbir did, like I did, like you did, I am doing this, how can I do it better? I learned that, I wanted to share, things like that. And you know what? they are new students, the new intake of PhD students, and because our group is now on the website of CES, if you know that. So people are contacting me saying, can we join the group? Of course they can. So I expect within a couple of meetings, we are going to be having first year students, and their problems and questions are going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
You know, so we will see how things are going to go from there. We might break down and we might keep our group together, and we might help them initiate their own group, because they are going to be talking about, you know, the framework and the question and the upgrade and the research question and so on. And we are busy with analysis and coding. It's different. Or I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. You know, but it's something to keep in mind, because yeah, we are having new students, and you know, some of our colleagues are just graduating, so they are leaving us. What we want to do is try and get them to in our meetings and see what they can tell us about their journey.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
Henry is such
yes,
an inspiration.
I
Just
know.
hearing his story, and it gives you hope seeing people going over the other side.
Yes, I was thinking about getting him to join us, because he did join us once, if you remember. But
He's coming back for his graduation in January, so you should contact him.
Exactly, that's what I was hoping, because I want him to join us after the fact, you know, after finishing and submitting. And I know he did, there was an event with him, the lunch and everything. I couldn't join, but I'm sure it was brilliant. So, yeah.
It was brilliant. Yeah, I happened to be in England for that occasion, and it was really good. And Henry's been helping with my research as well, so he's been doing some work in school with me, which is just really, really helpful, because actually having his insights, you know, and talking about what I'm doing is just so precious.
Yes.
And it's very encouraging. For me, I think I've seen the way that he talks change, you know? And I think that that's one of the things that is part of the journey, is actually believing that you're an academic. To the point that you can actually, when you get to the Viva, actually be convincing. And actually seeing Henry on that journey encourages me, because I don't feel at the moment that I could anyway, you know, sound like I know what I'm talking about. But actually seeing that transition, I find really helpful, because you think, well, if Henry can do it, maybe some of us can as well, you know?
Yeah, why not?
What did Henry do his research
in? His research is about schools in his home country, isn't it?
It's in Cameroon. It's about teacher motivation and what actually because a lot of teachers don't go to work in certain places in Africa. He was looking at actually what is it about the schools where the teachers turn up, what is it that actually is motivating them to do that, with regards to the schools where they're not, what's going wrong. So what is happening, the leadership and the motivation to actually make the different schools work. And I think he did a comparative research in an area that had been quite war-torn, and an area that it was quite rural and war-torn, and an area that was much more central. It's a very good research project. I'm sure it is.
Yes, that's the inspiring part about it, isn't it? Yeah, it sounds very inspiring.
He did it in Cameroon.
And I think he did a lot of case study work as well, because he kept saying to me, so this is case study, this and that, and I'm thinking, but my project's an action research project, so I don't know how this fits in, because I got back to the whole, is case study a methodology, or is it a research way of using a research thing? But I know, so I'm still exploring that.
I see.
But I think getting people who have graduated back to come in and talk would be really helpful, because actually they can then, you know, give tips and offer advice about the track to avoid and the things that are really helpful. Yes,
and you know, Emma Williams, who is a member of staff, she contacted me about if we want help from academic staff. And from my discussion in the last session, people want to know about publication and how do you publish a paper and things like that. So I got back to her and I said, can you please provide a member of academic staff to join us in one of our future sessions and tell us about publication strategy and how we do. There are a couple of things that I mentioned, and I urge you now, if there is a certain topic that you want to hear about, just send me an email or write it on the Facebook page and I will make sure to pass it on. So the topics that I found people are more interested in is publication and joint publication. Joint publication is such a fascinating thing because essentially what you do is when you finish your PhD, instead of having one journal under your name, you will have 4 or 5, and you will appear to be an expert in a couple of topics. Anyways, let's not go into that right now. It's a long story.
It's difficult to find people to join public.
That was the trick. How do you organize and how do you organize the whole project? That was one of the topics. And there was another one about funding your research, which is how you get research grants, because it's really very competitive, and there are some tricks. And we were thinking about a senior member of academic staff, someone who has been doing research for a long time, and they will know tricks of the trade, so to speak.
Yeah, and if you want to sort of have a career, when is the right point in the research? In the PhD to start looking at jobs.
Exactly.
Should you be looking at the end of the second year, beginning of the third year?
Exactly, things like that. So I got back to her and I told her these are the things that we are really interested in. And I'm taking this chance to tell you, if you have something you're interested in, tell me or tell Emma and I will pass it on. And what she said, I will contact my colleagues and I will find the proper person for each topic. But she is still waiting for our time schedule. So what I'm doing today is setting up the time schedule and sharing it with you, and then sending it to Emma and saying, this is our meeting schedule, can you get someone on these dates? And I will just have to wait and see. Okay, so expect guests, expect more engaging sessions, and stay positive.
Yeah.
And it can be isolating when you do your PhD, just because the very nature of it, you're sort of doing your data collection, transcribing, analysis, and then you're not always on campus either.
Yeah.
And so it's important. I think this is really, really important to attend and keep these events going, because it helps to build the community around the process. And
I agree.
It's really important to get support from people.
Yeah.
And holding each other accountable to stay on task and keep going and encourage each other is really good. Yeah.
So you guys are meeting your supervisor. How often do you meet your supervisor? Because it's just something that 2 weeks. I always worry about that because...
Yeah, same here. I haven't met my supervisor. We share the same one, don't we? I haven't met her in literally the last 6-7 weeks.
Oh, good.
I don't know what's happened. And also,
good for you, because I went through the same thing.
Have you been getting long responses between emails? Because usually she's really good at just emailing back straight away. But I haven't heard from her for a week now. I sent an email and then I sent another one.
Now, usually she used to be very responsive, but now she changed and she's not always on campus.
Okay. Yeah.
So what you get is an automatic response, and then 2 or 3 days after that, usually you get the response.
Okay.
And
it's the same supervisor.
Yes, but I think a week is a little bit too much. Maybe I'm sure she missed it, because she doesn't take that long. No, I'm sure she missed it.
Usually.
Yeah, I'm sure she did. Now, I meet her about once a month. That's the rule. But sometimes, I remember first year, maybe 2 months. It was 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah, or maybe even a little bit more than that. And until she actually sent me an message. Are you still alive? Are you still here? Basically, if you have nothing to show, you feel like, why do I bother? Why I'm going to?
Time. I have nothing to bring apart from I'm telling him, I'm doing so far. I've done 3 transcriptions, 2 transcriptions, and that's it. And I was committed like
Yeah,
a month's
but
time.
in my experience, I worry, and then when I show up, it's such a relief because they know what we go through. I mean, supervisors, they have experience and they know how sometimes we feel like we don't have anything to show for it.
Yeah.
But if you've been working, they can sense that. And the key message here is that they are on your side. Although it's hard to think of them like that, it always seems like you are showing up for them. You are giving, but no, you don't need their validation. They're actually on your side. Yeah. And how often do you meet your supervisor?
Well, I meet my supervisor
Or communicate
when I come
with-
home to England,
with
so
them.
that's every other month or so. So I saw
Yeah.
my supervisor at the middle of October, and I'm seeing her again the week before Christmas.
I see. And do you communicate with her during those meetings? Do you communicate like in email or something like that?
Yeah, my chief supervisor is absolutely outstanding. She's really, really supportive, and I couldn't wish for somebody better. She's just brilliant. So she will, we've agreed that I will send some work at the beginning of December, and then she will have a look at it, and we'll talk about it when we meet up December the 21st. So I've got work, she's made sure I've got work that I can do, and then a deadline that I'm working towards, and then I've got something that I can send to her, and then we've got something to talk about. So she's really focused and structured and making sure that actually I don't, time is precious in England.
Yeah.
So she wants to make sure that we hit those points and we actually do something of value.
I see.
And she was so supportive the last meeting. I think sometimes when you have to make an effort because you haven't got access all the time, you make those times work better because they're precious. You can't afford not to use it really well. So that's been one of the upsides of being over here, that actually I've had to be really more focused and very clear about what I need at those points.
Oh, that's very
And I think
interesting.
if you're clear, supervisors like that. If you've got a list of exactly what you need, then they like to be able to deliver that. I think actually, that's been my experience, and So I only get to meet her every other month, but I think the quality of the time that I have is really high because I actually make sure that I know what I need.
I see.
And then she's very good at delivering.
Well, that's really good to hear. Right. Anything else?